Bob Sanborn, President and CEO of Children at Risk, and every other year, Children at Risk for the last 30 years has been putting out a publication called Growing Up in Houston. And what it is, it's basically an assessment of how we're doing and a look at specifically some of the data around how we're doing with children in Houston, in and around Houston. I want to thank the United Way for its support, and also a lot of the supporters of Children at Risk for the work that they do in helping us do the research and get all of this data so that we can get a clear picture of what's going on with our kids. You know, during this Final Four time, right, a lot of people in our country are looking at Houston, so it's probably is appropriate for us to look internally at ourselves and how we're doing as a city. And I think what's interesting as we look purely at the data and we take feeling out of it is that we're not doing so well when it comes to our kids. And so that's what Growing Up in Houston, sort of the theme this year, is that we're just not doing as well as we should be doing by our children in the state of Texas and certainly in the city of Houston. In the city of Houston, we have close to 2 million children in the greater Houston area. About 70% of those children qualify for free and reduced school lunch. So that means that the vast majority of our kids, their families are low-income families. And while sometimes we look at that federal poverty rate of 27% in our state and we say, well, that's how many poor kids we have, the reality is we have many more families than that that are struggling to make ends meet. And it's real appropriate that as we look at those numbers as we look at the status of our children, because one of the key things that you often look at as researchers to see how kids are doing is what is the income level of their family, where do they stand economically, and what we're finding is that it's dire for 70% of the children. We also can see that over 75% of our children in the greater Houston area are children of color. And when we look at a state that doesn't want to talk about diversity, we look at our own city and we understand that we're talking about the majority of our kids. Moreover, when we look at immigration in our city, over half of the kids in our city are immigrants or children of immigrants with at least one parent who was born outside of this country. And so we live in a state that's by its very nature seems to be disrespecting immigrants. And so in a sense, they're disrespecting the children. And we just have to look at policy in our state to understand that we live in a state that regards immigrant children as something other than those that belong here. And so it's a key theme that we see this year, that as we're growing as a city, that growth is really because of immigrant children in many ways, and yet we're not paying attention to this. I often use this analogy where imagine if you had a Little League baseball team and half of your team was made up of a group that the audience would continually disrespect. You know, you would probably, as a coach or as a parent of that team, you'd want to fight for all of those kids on your team. And yet in Houston, here we have more than half of our kids that are of immigrants, and yet we're not doing that much about it in a state that continually talks about this. When one of the things that Children at Risk is famous for is grading schools, right? We often give schools a grade, and we even went to the state and we got the state to start grading a lot of schools. And so when we grade how we're doing when it comes to kids, what I'll often say is that when it comes to optimism, we have a lot of optimism in Texas, and I'd probably give us a B here in Houston for the optimism for where our kids are going. And that's good. That's a good start. But when you look purely at the evidence, we probably get a D, and in many other areas a failing grade, right? So I think that we need to understand that all is not coming up roses for the children here in Houston. Because of immigration, one of the things we know is that families distrust our government, and what that means is that families that are in low-income areas that are families of immigrants are often not accessing some of the resources available to them, not accessing some of the benefits available to them, and that really hurts our numbers in terms of kids that are food insecure, in terms of kids that apply for assistance with child care. So the very distrust that we are producing with a lot of our families is leading to some of these numbers. When we look at food insecurity, simply at food insecurity in our city, we know that 23% of the children in Harris County don't know where their next meal is coming from, or some meal in the coming week they don't know where it's coming from. They are food insecure. We're talking about 300,000 kids just in Harris County that are food insecure. 23%, this compares to about 18% across the state. So in a city where no one should be hungry, we have a quarter of our kids that are wondering, their families certainly are wondering where that meal is going to come from. When it comes to mental health, Dr. Freeney is going to talk about that in a little bit, but one thing that I think is very noteworthy is that in Harris County, we have, in the county as a whole, for counselors in the schools, and please note that many counselors in the schools do mental health counseling. Many counselors in the schools are so busy they don't have time for mental health counseling. But we know that there's a lot of mental health need in our schools because of the pandemic and because of many other things that are going on. And yet we have, per counselor, 919 in Harris County. In HISD, per counselor, 1,690 students. And the recommended ratio is about 670. So when you compare the 1,690 in HISD to the recommended national ratio of 670 per student, we're really not doing well when it comes to mental health in our schools. I want to talk about education very briefly, because really the way that we break the cycle of poverty many times is through early education and education. We do a thing where we look at gold ribbon schools, high performing schools within high poverty areas. In 2022, we had a decrease in the greater Houston region of these high-performing, high-poverty schools. We had 72 gold ribbon schools is what we call them, down from 82 before the pandemic. In HISD, we did see a little bit of an increase in gold ribbon schools, but overall, what we see in public education is that, again, a distrust in what's going on, not enough effort to serve those low-income kids. And then on top of that, I think we have to mention that with a state takeover, it's going to be a while before we have the solid leadership needed in Houston to really try to overcome everything that's needed. We will have that optimism that maybe a state takeover might help, or maybe the state won't take over. But the fact of the matter is that the reality is that when you see changes in school districts, it's always because there's activist leadership in charge. And we're not going to have that for a while in HISD. I want to mention early education briefly, because if there's a silver bullet in ending poverty after education, it's that early education, that prep for the academic world. There are, under the age of 5 in Harris County, a little over 326,000 children. However, there are only 150,000 child care seats available in Harris County. In Houston, in Harris County alone, we know that there are 47 zip codes that we would qualify as child care deserts, where there's not access to quality child care. For every 100 working parents who need child care in our area, there are only 61 seats available. So that means there's about 40 kids that are needing child care on any given day in Harris County that aren't being able to get it. And then finally, I want to talk about, very briefly, health care coverage. If kids aren't healthy, they're not going to get ahead. And we have more uninsured children in our city, in our greater metropolitan area. We have more uninsured children than any city in the economically developed world. And that's important to note. In the economically developed world, we have more uninsured kids than any other city. And so it's more than in Texas, more than in the United States, and more than in any part of the modern world. And so we need to understand that we have insurance for kids. But when parents can't get insurance, they often don't know about getting insurance for their kids. And so 15% of all the children in Harris County are uninsured. This compares to about 5% nationally. So when people ask us from Houston, what do you love about your city? Inevitably, the answer is, well, I love the diversity of our city and I love the food. And the diversity of our city is seemingly under attack at every level by our state. It's sort of the thing that our state doesn't like about Houston, doesn't like about cities, is that we are diverse, and yet it's our strength. And when we talk about food, it's really a shame that a quarter of our kids can't talk about food because they're food insecure. So when we talk about all of this, the problem in a sense, is us here in our city, right? We're either not seeing or understanding the facts, or we're not fighting hard enough for our children in our city. But the first part of solving any problem, as everyone knows, is understanding that you do have a problem. And when it comes to kids in Texas and when it comes to children in Houston, we have a problem. And so that'd be a good quote, I think. Houston, we have a problem. I'm just thinking there, Rebecca. So, but I think that, we have this optimism, though, right? We want to solve these things. And here's the important thing. This is not rocket science. There's clear evidence. There are clear best practices on what we need to be doing with our kids. And we have so many great experts in the city that can help us there because we are a vibrant city of a lot of opportunity. But let's go to some of these great experts that we have with us today. First off, my buddy, Dr. Jamie Freeney, who is the director of the Center for School Behavioral Health with Mental Health America of Greater Houston. Dr. Freeney, there you go.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sanborn and Children at Risk, for being a champion of children's mental health. In Houston, we do have a problem, but we also have hope.
Yeah.
So the Center for School Behavioral Health at Mental Health America of Greater Houston supports the healthy emotional, physical, behavioral, and mental development of children and adolescents through education, advocacy, and collaboration. Child and adolescent mental health is a public health priority. Rates of anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, suicidal behavior, and substance use among youth in the Greater Houston area have risen. The number of children and adolescents presenting in emergency rooms with mental health crisis has increased roughly from 50 a month to 400 a month. Young people are presenting with suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, aggressive behavior, and other behavioral health crises. There are several factors contributing to the rise in mental illness in young people. Factors include natural disasters, abuse, neglect, safety at home, safety at school, safety during out-of-school times when they're in the community, social media, cyberbullying, racial and ethnic discrimination, and the many barriers that make it difficult to access mental and behavioral health services. I only have a few minutes to highlight a few, but we must continue to advocate for policies and practices in all of these areas that reduce risk factors and increase protective factors so that our children can develop into mentally healthy adults. Cyberbullying is an umbrella term used to describe different forms of abuse, online abuse, including posting graphically inappropriate pictures, reputation attacks, doxing, and harassment. Students at the school or in the community use cell phones, game consoles, laptops, computers, and any other device that can access the internet in order to abuse, harass, and bully other young people. Children who have been bullied or cyberbullied can experience a wide range of negative emotions, including embarrassment, fear, anger, sadness, and hopelessness. Such emotions, if gone unaddressed, can result in drastic negative effects on mental health. According to research by the National Institutes of Health, children who experienced cyberbullying had an increased risk of suicidal thoughts and attempts. Racism and discrimination negatively impact the mental health of children, disproportionately impacting Indigenous and Black children. In an article released in November of 2022 in the Journal of Osteopathic Medicine, researchers found that racial, ethnic discrimination towards children increased from 6% in 2016 to 9% in 2020. Since then, we've experienced national crisis, civic unrest, and both of these have led to harassment and negative portrayals of entire racial ethnic groups. Because Houston is one of the most racially diverse cities, it is necessary to acknowledge and address factors impacting children in specific populations. Addressing harmful stereotypes of culture, understanding our own personal bias, learning more about the issue locally here in Houston and Harris County, and providing culturally responsive programming and care may reduce the number of young people experiencing racism and discrimination. Anti-racism resources for mental health professionals, physicians, educators, and parents can help reduce the number of children impacted by racism and discriminatory practices. Understanding the signs and symptoms of mental illness and how they present in young people is key to the appropriate referral process and making sure that they get the help that they need. The signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression and trauma, such as agitation, aggressive behavior, body aches, panic attacks, and withdrawal, can present during classroom or out of school time, causing students to miss lessons, miss tutoring opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and result in an overall decline in academic performance or a dismissal from a community program. In school, signs and symptoms of mental illness are sometimes misinterpreted as insubordination or willful defiance, leading to an overuse of in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions. When students are sitting in suspension, they miss class assignments, and are at a higher risk for future suspensions and a decreased performance and interest in school. The use of in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension vary across race ethnicity. In the 2021-2022 school year, Black students in Texas accounted for 32% of all out-of-school suspensions, despite making up only 13% of the student population. Furthermore, the same behaviors can lead to undue punishment, such as being arrested or restrained. The U.S. Department of Education measured the prevalence of public school students subjected to mechanical and physical restraint for the 2017-2018 school year, and in that study across the nation, 45% of the students that were mechanically restrained in the U.S. were from Texas. We must stop criminalizing students and respond to their cries for help with a culturally responsive, trauma-informed approach. Work shortages exist across the healthcare and education systems and include licensed pediatric psychiatrists, psychologists, child and adolescent counselors, school counselors, and other licensed mental health professionals. 98% of Texas' 254 counties are designated as mental health professional shortage areas. Additionally, school districts are also not able to meet the recommended ratio of 1 school counselor per 250 students. School districts in Harris County have 919 students per counselor, as Dr. Bob explained, exceeding the recommended ratio by 669 students. Students that need counseling but do not have access to a school counselor often continue to go with their mental health needs unaddressed. As the Growing Up in Houston report states, we want all Houston families, regardless of status, to have access to quality mental health and social emotional support. So it is crucial for caregivers, educators, and advocates to work together to build a network of care to ensure the mental health needs of youth are met. We encourage parents to understand the signs and symptoms of mental health conditions and reach out to your child's provider for concerns. Mental Health America of Greater Houston continues to offer free health screenings online that you as an adult and youth can take to help determine whether you are experiencing symptoms of a mental health condition and need to reach out for help. We encourage educators and out-of-school time program staff to receive professional development training in trauma and children's mental health to ensure that they can recognize the signs and symptoms of mental illness and refer appropriately. And we encourage districts to partner with your local mental health providers for referrals and to increase accessibility to care. Thank you, Dr. Sanborn and Children at Risk, for your partnership and for the opportunity to advocate on behalf of children's mental health.
Thank you, Dr. Freeney, very much. Let's go to health now, physical health, and let's talk with Patricia Watson. She's with the Houston Health Department with the City of Houston. Patricia, come on up.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you so much, everyone, for including us in this press conference. So again, I'm Patricia Watson with the Houston Health Department, Assistant Director. The mission of the Houston Health Department is to work in partnership with the community to promote and protect the health and social well-being of Houstonians and the environment in which they live. This includes children. As Dr. Sanborn mentioned earlier, there's such a great need for health coverage for children in addition to the food insecurities. So we believe it's important that children have access to medical care to improve their overall health and health conditions. The department promotes all kids having a medical home and access to medical care. In the effort of helping that happen, we link children and their families to health care coverage through our Client Access Initiative. This may include referring them to be screened for Medicaid, CHIP, or in other cases, local programs through Harris County. The department is committed to continuing to serve as a safety net provider, offering programs like the See to Succeed Kids Vision Initiative that provides free, no-cost exams and eyewear, the oral health services in our 4 health centers, immunizations, and the Women, Infant, and Children's program, which is related to nutrition and often referred to as WIC. Any families that may be interested in accessing those services can call 311 to locate the nearest health center. Again, we're committed to being that safety net, and we appreciate being included today.
Thank you, Patricia, very much. We want to talk a little bit about education, so we asked the mayor's office to send the education czar over. Olivera Jankowska is with us today. And Olivera?
Thank you, Dr. Sanborn. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again so much for coming out today. My name is Olivera Jankowska, and I'm the Director of Education at the City of Houston for Mayor Turner. I'd like to first thank Children at Risk and the United Way of Greater Houston for their steadfast partnership with the Mayor's Office of Education and Youth Engagement. We've been working for a long time, and trust me, if there's any mayor in the nation, it's Mayor Turner that really cares about children and young people. Our office receives a lot of support in response to the issues that we see at reports like Growing Up Houston, and we would like to continue addressing those. But timely data is really the crucial, important aspect for our policies and for our decision-making process. So with this report and what it will be its programmatic response, we are leading the way in improving the quality of life for children in the city and the state, because there is really a lack of data and a lack of reports like this around the nation for us to understand what are the true issues from children that we experience. In addition to that, the Mayor's Office of Education and Youth Engagement engages with young people to hear the young voices. So we, throughout every single program, every single thing that we do with the city, we always include youth voice, and that is very important. It is actually a recent decision that Mayor Turner supported an initiative called the Child Friendly Cities Initiative, and the City of Houston, don't know if you know, is the first candidate in the United States for this recognition given by UNICEF. There are over 3,000 of these cities around the world, but in the United States, Houston is the first one. In fact, by the end of this month, we will be submitting our report based on the action items we took in the past year, and hopefully we'll receive that final designation as a child-friendly city. What that means, more youth voice, more people engaged in the policy and the work we do, and of course, the most important, more feedback of the programs we do. Oftentimes, adults, decision makers, we tend to produce data, work to solve problems we found in the data, but we forget that sometimes there's qualitative responses, there's voices, there's youth who have a variety of experiences that can contribute to that work. For example, oftentimes we take a look at income as a indicator of poverty. However, there's a lot better measurements, such as the Social Vulnerability Index, that we could take a look, because youth who live in, for example, in households that may have okay income still may have food insecurities and other issues, because there's a lot of other expenses. We talked about health issues. We talked about health coverage. we all know that a single health issue could tip over a very stable family. So in response to all of these issues that we've been working with the City of Houston, we try to target what's not available in the community. We like to pick up the issues that it is just too hard to address. And so it is challenging on our part, of course, because we have to always respond to things such as early childhood education and childcare deserts. And you all might have heard we are trying public-private partnerships to bring in some free quality childcare with the Bezos Foundation. Among many of these programs, one of the key aspects that we are trying to address, number one issue listed in the report, as well as what we heard from youth, as well as multiple studies, and Dr. Freeney referred to a very new one, mental health among youth is very alarming. What we're doing at the city, well, first and foremost, we know that we cannot reach every young person out there. But what we can do is we can train the trainer. This is a model that we've seen that effectively works. What this means, we would like to help providers who support young people with the emotional backpack. Mental Health America is one of our partners. Just for example, in the past year, we've trained over 700 of those community leaders and partners who then have a ripple effect across 150,000 students between ages 5 and 17. We continue to do this, but this is not enough, certainly not enough, because the pandemic really exacerbated the pre-existing challenges the America youth had and our generation facing. So, in addition to supporting mental health, some of the responses to the Growing Up Houston report, my office conducts a series of empowerment programs as well. We have one of the most important is to provide economic opportunities during idle time. We know that violence spikes during idle time. The way we respond to that is we offer, for the younger ones, we have extracurricular programs. There's a program called Out to Learn within our office with over 600 providers, free and low cost out of school and after school programming. But more importantly, I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has heard that Mayor Turner has set a very ambitious goal with his Hire Houston Youth Program. It's in the 8th year, and he's looking to hire 20,000 young people between ages 16 and 24 for the upcoming summer. Hire Houston Youth not only provides the first job opportunity for some of these young individuals, but it also provides an opportunity for people to access financial literacy. And that's something that we can talk about all day, how it has a ripple effect throughout the young person's life. They can access resources with mental health. There's really a plethora of activities that we provide in our office. So I invite you to check out our website and social media. We are where young people are, and so a lot of the adults don't necessarily see the work we do because we really cater at the young population. So social media channels and different challenges that we post to attract as many young people as possible to engage with us. So in summary, the data provided in Growing Up Houston will be key for us to rebuild, and government officials, especially Mayor Turner's a very focused equity approach that he has developed with the complete communities and the youth who live in the complete communities will be instrumental for us to develop what comes next so that the optimistic B actually turns into an actual B. So without expending too much, I just want to thank you all so much for the opportunity to talk about programs that we have in our office. And on behalf of Mayor Turner, we really wish that the community continues supporting initiatives that inform us about the state of children and youth. Because look at even in this room, we're talking about children, we're talking about youth. There's not a young person sitting in here. We want to make sure that young people do provide the feedback and the input in the work we do. So reports like this are important to find those areas that we want to engage young people. So again, thank you all so much.
Olivera, thank you very much. I want to say a few words in Spanish, and then I want to open it up to questions. Algunas palabras para nuestros amigos en la prensa latino. estamos hablando hoy de qué es el estatus de niños aquí en nuestra ciudad de Houston. Y lo que sabemos es que hay muchas áreas donde necesitamos trabajo para el éxito de nuestros niños. Y estamos hablando, necesitamos mejores escuelas, necesitamos better daycare, mejor daycare en nuestra ciudad. Pero el salud es una cosa importante, que no hay seguro para el salud para un gran por ciento de nuestros niños en nuestra ciudad. También hay un problema con la salud mental aquí en nuestro estado, en nuestro país, especialmente aquí en la ciudad de Houston. Y tenemos que hacer mucho más en ese área. Pero la otra cosa de que estamos hablando es que más que medio de nuestros niños en el área de Houston son inmigrantes de otros países o son niños de inmigrantes. Y esos mismos personas no tienen confianza en nuestro gobierno. Y cuando no hay confianza en el gobierno, hay muchos problemas para los ciudadanos, para esos niños propios. Y eso tiene que cambiar. Cuando tenemos un gobierno en Austin que tal vez no sabe qué está pasando con nuestros niños, especialmente en Houston, ellos tienen que saber eso para que la población empiece a tener confianza en el gobierno. Eso tiene que cambiar. Y la otra cosa es que damos un grado a cómo estamos haciendo con nuestros niños, y por optimism tenemos un B, una B, pero la realidad es que es un D, y hay mucho más que tenemos que hacer para el éxito de nuestros niños. Olivera, sé que usted habla un poco de español. ¿Quieres decir algo en español o no?
Sí, tal vez puedo andar un poco más de los programas que tenemos en la oficina del alcalde.
Poco tiempo.
Sí, claro, un minuto. Los programas que son más importantes para saber es la gente que son entre los años 16 y 24. Pueden participar en nuestro programa que se llama Hire Houston Youth. La página es hirehoustonYouth.org. Hasta 23 de abril tenemos una fecha límite para participar. Estamos buscando 20,000 personas para participar en este programa, que hay no solamente un empleo por el verano, sino empoderamiento como la educación financiera, como apoyo con la salud ambiental y muchas cosas. Pero de parte del alcalde Turner nos agradecemos mucho, y por favor búscanos sobre la página de la ciudad de Houston, y gracias.
Gracias, Olivera. Dr. Frina, ¿usted habla español? No. Patricia, ¿hablas español? No. Pero Porfirio está aquí. No, I'm not going to bring you up, Porfirio, pero está aquí para hablar de salud si necesitas. Questions? You guys have any questions for us that we can answer? Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned the state takeover of HISD. What would you like to see this board of managers that we're expected to see come in June or a little bit later? What would you like to see them do with this information, this data?
I think if I put my optimistic side forward, right, which so many of us here in Houston have, I think what we want to see is that they don't make mistakes that new superintendents have made in the past, right? Look at what we have that's good. We have great magnet schools. Keep those schools going. Make sure that we're staying with a lot of time on task, right? Some of the schools that are doing Saturday school and great after-school programs, we want to see that continue, because that's very necessary for low-income kids to be successful. And then really double down on early education, pre-K. That's the real key area that we see a real transition with the great majority of our kids here in Houston. We started doing pre-K a number of years ago when Terry Greer was the superintendent, and we are reaping the rewards now in terms of seeing some of those better performance in our schools. It really starts early. So if we're optimistic, and there's a lot of reasons to not be optimistic, because all the stirring it up really causes a lot of commotion, especially at the senior levels. But I think at least doubling down on those things that we know work is going to be real important. Other questions? Yeah, sure.
How do the metrics that you mentioned, how do they compare to several years past? Are we doing worse than before? Is the pandemic still impacting a lot of those?
Well, the pandemic is absolutely impacting a lot, and especially in the area of mental health, right? Kids are having a very tough transition as they come back to school, and that's real important, right? The thing that kids love and that really allows kids to succeed is routine. Kids love routine. And so the pandemic really disrupted a lot of sort of realities in life, a lot of things that sort of were normal milestones for children, and that was disrupted. So we're going to see that happen for some time. I think one of the things, though, that we saw is that during the pandemic with stimulus checks, with child tax credits, we saw a dip in child poverty, right? So we actually saw low-income parents that were able to spend money on food and utilities and on things that they wanted to spend money on to better their families. And so we are still reaping some of those rewards as well. And so so that was an interesting thing. I think also in Houston, we saw the sort of the food, the wheels around food with the food bank and HISD and a lot of groups that really stepped up to get food into the hands of families. That was a great success, and we should be learning from some of those things. So there's some good things that happened. We had extraordinary collaboration at the nonprofit level and with cities, you know, in ways that we hadn't. I mean, after every hurricane, there's always been great collaboration here in our city, and we just sort of continued that across the state. And so there's some things that we really learned from the pandemic that we want to keep going with. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at this data for kids, you have to be a little ashamed and a little alarmed, right? It's a red flag. And so we just need to keep looking at best practices and stay away from ideological knee-jerk reactions on things that mean nothing to the well-being of our kids. So, other questions? Preguntas en español, guys?
Doctor Summer,
Sí, sí.
¿cuál pudiera ser el remedio para tratar de mejorar esas carencias que hay en los niños aquí en la ciudad?
Hay algunas cosas que son muy importantes. Uno es que tenemos que, los líderes en Austin tienen que saber que Houston es importante. Tenemos una población que es un cuarto de población en el estado de Texas, un poco más de cuarto de población. Y tenemos en Houston, en Dallas, en las ciudades, tenemos la mayoría del futuro de nuestro estado. Así, tienen que cambiar en Austin. Tienen que saber que sí somos un estado de inmigrantes y nuestro fuerte es inmigrantes. Ellos tienen que saber eso, no saben eso. Y la otra cosa es, tienen que cambiar lo que está pasando con el educación, early education, educación temprano, y también con las escuelas K through 12. Ellos tienen que ser más fuertes porque nuestros niños necesitan buenas escuelas y para ese éxito necesitamos eso. Okay. All right.
Me gustaría saber un poco sobre este impacto. Vemos cifras bastante alarmantes con respecto al tema de la salud mental de los niños. ¿De qué manera esto está impactando en las escuelas? Y vemos también que la violencia también ha incrementado en escuelas, tiroteos. Acaba de ocurrir uno en Nashville, muy lejos de acá, pero el año pasado vivimos en Uvalde. Esto quizás pueda tener el tema de salud mental relación con esto y pudiese estar ocasionando, generando este tipo de situaciones.
Porfirio, did you get all that? Did you have a good answer for that?
Yeah, I think.
Come on over,
Okay.
Porfirio. Introduce yourself, too. Sorry.
Porfirio Villarreal, vocero del Departamento de Salud de Houston, Public Information Officer with the Houston Health Department. Una de las maneras que impacta pues este tipo de eventos sería ese estrés que causa en los padres y los niños. Entonces, cuando el niño esté estresado en casa, los padres también pueden transmitir ese estrés a los niños y luego van a las escuelas. Una vez que ese estrés se demuestra en las escuelas, el niño no puede aprender. Tal vez tenga, por ejemplo, una enfermedad o tenga, por ejemplo, caries, no vea bien porque necesita lentes. Entonces, esto es aún más lo que se puede agregar a ese montón de o grupo de estresantes.
Gracias, Porfirio.
El acceso de la y solamente quiero añadir que el acceso también acceso de la naturaleza es muy importante y nosotros no estamos utilizando todo lo que tenemos aquí en la ciudad El alcalde Turner ya inició muchos programas que da oportunidades para la gente, salen fuera. Por ejemplo, ya terminamos con algunos parques que nunca existieron en algunas comunidades que fueron sin parques por muchos años. Entonces, necesitamos utilizar a la naturaleza. Es un remedio natural por la salud mental. Y por eso ya tenemos un programa que se llama COBOR, es el derecho de los niños a la naturaleza, y tiene dos específicos derechos, pero en este momento estamos trabajando para añadir más. Y esto creo que nos van a ayudar un poco más con la salud mental.
Okay. Thank you guys very, very much. Thanks for being here today. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to applaud. Thank you guys. Olivera?
Thank you.
You speak great Spanish, Olivera?
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I need a reason.
You didn't? You don't need it.
I